Ever wondered how the rich and famous say their final goodbyes? Have you imagined what $1 million funeral looks like? When celebrities die, their funerals often match the grandeur of their lives, becoming spectacles of wealth, adoration, and sometimes peculiar personal requests. Number 12. Michael Jackson, the Golden Casket Goodbye. Did you know Michael Jackson's funeral cost over $1 million? When the King of Pop died in 2009, the world stood still. His memorial service at the Staples Center in Los Angeles was watched by an estimated 1 billion people worldwide, making it one of the most viewed events in streaming history. Jackson's body rested in a custom-made, 14-karat gold-plated Promethean casket valued at approximately $25,000. The casket featured blue velvet lining and was similar to the one used for James Brown's funeral. The private service before the public memorial was attended by family and close friends, with Jackson's children placing letters and drawings in their father's casket. The public memorial featured performances from Mariah Carey, Stevie Wonder, Jennifer Hudson, and Usher. Jackson's daughter Paris delivered a heartbreaking speech, saying, "Ever since I was born, Daddy has been the best father you could ever imagine." The motorcade and security arrangements alone cost the city of Los Angeles over $1,400,000. Jackson's body wasn't actually buried until weeks after his death, with the family waiting until September 3, 2009, to lay him to rest at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California. Number 11. Princess Diana, a nation in mourning. Have you ever seen an entire country come to a standstill? When Princess Diana died in 1997, the UK experienced unprecedented public grief. Over 3 million people lined the streets of London to watch her funeral procession, while approximately 2.5 billion people worldwide viewed the ceremony on television. Diana's coffin was carried on a gun carriage along Hyde Park to Westminster Abbey, accompanied by 500 representatives of various charities associated with her. The procession included Prince Philip, Prince Charles, Diana's brothers, and her sons, Prince William and Prince Harry, who were just 15 and 12 at the time. The image of the two young princes walking behind their mother's coffin became one of the most heartbreaking symbols of the day. Elton John performed a rewritten version of his song "Candle in the Wind," originally written for Marilyn Monroe but adapted with the opening line, "Goodbye England's Rose," for Diana. The recording of this performance later became the second best-selling single of all time. After the service, Diana's body was driven to her family estate at Althorpe in Northamptonshire. Rather than being buried in the family vault, she was laid to rest on a small island in the middle of a lake, where visitors can't directly access her grave but can leave tributes at a memorial temple across from the lake. Number 10. Elvis Presley, the King's Final Curtain Call. Could 80,000 people show up for your funeral? When Elvis Presley died in 1977, fans from around the world flocked to Memphis to pay their respects. The King of Rock and Roll was initially laid in state at Graceland, where thousands of mourners passed by his copper coffin to say goodbye. Elvis was buried in a massive 900-pound copper coffin with a white suit and blue tie, with his middle name Aaron misspelled as Aaron on his tombstone based on his personal preference. His funeral procession included more than 100 cars and traveled down Elvis Presley Boulevard, lined with devastated fans holding signs expressing their love for the icon. The funeral itself was a private affair at Graceland with about 200 guests in attendance, including former President Jimmy Carter, who sent a representative, and celebrities like Caroline Kennedy, Anne Margaret, James Brown, and John Wayne. Elvis was initially buried at Forest Hill Cemetery next to his mother, but after an attempt to steal his body, both he and his mother were reinterred in the Meditation Garden at Graceland, where visitors can pay their respects today. Perhaps the most bizarre aspect of Elvis's funeral was the merchandise sold outside Graceland during the proceedings, including T-shirts that read, "The King Lives On," and commemorative photos. The estate would later turn into a massive business, with over 600,000 people visiting Graceland annually. Number 9. Whitney Houston, a homegoing fit for a diva. Did Whitney Houston's funeral live up to her voice? When the superstar singer died in 2012, her homegoing ceremony was broadcast live, allowing fans worldwide to participate in mourning the loss of the vocal powerhouse. Houston's funeral was held at the New Hope Baptist Church in Newark, New Jersey, the same church where she sang in the choir as a child. The invitation-only service lasted nearly 4 hours and featured performances by Alicia Keys, Stevie Wonder, and R. Kelly. Her godmother Aretha Franklin was scheduled to perform, but couldn't attend due to health issues. Kevin Costner, Houston's co-star in The Bodyguard, delivered an emotional eulogy, recalling how Houston had doubted herself before her screen test for the film. "The Whitney I knew, despite her success and worldwide fame, still wondered, am I good enough? Am I pretty enough? Will they like me?" he said. It was the burden that made her great and the part that caused her to stumble in the end. Houston's ex-husband Bobby Brown made headlines when he briefly appeared at the funeral but left after a seating dispute, claiming he and his family were asked to move several times. After the service, Houston was buried in a purple dress with gold slippers in a coffin reportedly lined with cream-colored silk. She was laid to rest next to her father at Fairview Cemetery in Westfield, New Jersey. Number 8. Marilyn Monroe, a funeral as mysterious as her life. Can a funeral be as secretive as it is famous? When Marilyn Monroe died in 1962, her funeral was a small, private affair, a stark contrast to her very public life. Only around 30 people were invited to the service at the Westwood Village Mortuary Chapel, orchestrated by her former husband Joe DiMaggio. DiMaggio, despite being divorced from Monroe for 8 years, took charge of the arrangements and limited the guest list to close friends and family. For 3 decades after her death, he had red roses delivered to her crypt 3 times a week. Notable attendees included acting teacher Lee Strasberg, who delivered the eulogy, and Monroe's Some Like It Hot co-star Jack Lemmon. Monroe was buried in a green Emilio Pucci dress and holding a small bouquet of pink roses. Her crypt at Corridor of Memories, 24, at Westwood Memorial Park in Los Angeles has become one of the most visited celebrity graves in the world. The bronze marker has darkened over the years due to countless fans touching it. Hugh Hefner, who featured Monroe in the first issue of Playboy without her consent, later purchased the crypt next to hers in 1992 for $75,000, saying, "Spending eternity next to Marilyn is an opportunity too sweet to pass up." He was indeed buried there following his death in 2017. Number 7. James Brown, multiple funerals for the godfather of soul. Did you know James Brown had 3 different funeral ceremonies? When the hardest working man in show business died on Christmas Day 2006, his farewell tour was appropriately extravagant and extended. Brown's body was first taken to New York's Apollo Theater, where he had made his explosive debut in 1956. Thousands of fans lined up for blocks to view Brown in his open gold casket, dressed in a blue suit, white gloves, and silver shoes. A public funeral followed at the James Brown Arena in his hometown of Augusta, Georgia, where Michael Jackson made a surprise appearance to pay respects. The most unusual aspect of Brown's funeral arrangements was his multiple outfit changes. For different services, his body was dressed in different costumes reflecting various phases of his career, including his signature cape. At one service, he wore white tails and silver shoes, while at another, he was dressed in a black suit with red shirt and sequined shoes. Adding to the drama, Brown wasn't actually buried until March 10, 2007, more than 2 months after his death, due to paternity claims and disputes among family members over his estate. He was finally laid to rest in a crypt at his daughter's home in South Carolina, though this wasn't the end of his journey. In 2011, he was moved again to a permanent mausoleum built for him, with room for family members. Number 6. Frank Sinatra, My Way Indeed. How do you bid farewell to the voice? When Frank Sinatra died in 1998, his funeral matched his larger-than-life persona. Held at the Good Shepherd Catholic Church in Beverly Hills, the service attracted 400 guests, including notable names like Jack Nicholson, Bruce Springsteen, Tony Bennett, Bob Dylan, and Don Rickles. Sinatra was buried with some meaningful items: a bottle of Jack Daniel's whiskey, a pack of Camel cigarettes, a Zippo lighter, all his favorites, and a roll of dimes. The dimes held special significance. Sinatra had carried them ever since his son Frank Jr. was kidnapped in 1963, when he needed to use pay phones during the crisis. In true Sinatra fashion, the funeral included some theatrical elements. As the coffin was carried out of the church, the organist played "Put Your Dreams Away," the closing theme to his television show. At the burial service at Desert Memorial Park in Cathedral City, California, the ceremony included a flyover by 4 Navy fighter jets, with one jet peeling away in the traditional missing man formation. Barbara Sinatra, his widow, requested that the inscription on his grave marker read, "The best is yet to come," which ironically happened to be the last song he ever performed in public. His simple grave marker has become a pilgrimage site for fans, who often leave liquor bottles, cigarettes, and dimes as tributes. Number 5. Elizabeth Taylor, fashionably late even to her own funeral. Would you expect anything less than dramatic from Hollywood's greatest diva? When Elizabeth Taylor died in 2011, her funeral instructions specifically requested that she arrive 15 minutes late to her own service, with her representative explaining she even wanted to be late for her own funeral. This final gesture perfectly captured her legendary sense of humor and flair for the dramatic. Taylor's private funeral was held at Forest Lawn Memorial Park in Glendale, California, just a day after her death, in accordance with her Jewish faith. The service lasted about an hour, and Taylor was entombed in the Great Mausoleum, the same building where her close friend Michael Jackson was laid to rest. The ceremony was attended by approximately 40 family members and close friends. Actor Colin Farrell recited a poem, and Taylor's son Michael Wilding Jr. spoke about his mother's extraordinary life. Rather than being somber, attendees described the service as a celebration of her colorful life. Taylor was buried with some of her favorite jewelry and a copy of Richard Burton's love poem, "The Comfort of the Rain," which he had written for her during their first marriage. Her violet-colored casket was adorned with gardenias, violets, and lily of the valley, her favorite flowers. Despite being one of the most photographed women in history, no cameras were allowed at her funeral, honoring her wish for privacy in her final moments in the public eye. Number 4. David Bowie, the secret cremation. Can a superstar have a funeral with no fanfare? When David Bowie died in 2016, he managed what seemed impossible for a global icon: a completely private departure. Bowie, who had kept his 18-month battle with liver cancer secret from all but his closest friends and family, was cremated without any public service or even family present, according to his explicit wishes. The cremation reportedly took place in New York shortly after his death, with no family or friends in attendance. Bowie had specifically requested a direct cremation, the most basic option available, with no funeral service or grave site. His ashes were scattered in Bali during a Buddhist ceremony, reflecting his longtime interest in the religion. While fans created impromptu memorials around the world, from his birthplace in Brixton, London to outside his New York apartment, those closest to him respected his desire to exit the world with the same artistic integrity with which he had lived in it. Bowie's final album, Black Star, released just 2 days before his death, served as his musical farewell and was filled with lyrical references to his impending death. Perhaps the most Bowie-esque aspect of his non-funeral was that he turned his death into his final artistic statement. By choosing to have no public ceremony, he maintained control of his narrative until the very end and beyond. His widow Iman later revealed she wears a necklace that simply reads David and never plans to remarry, saying, "I still feel married." Number 3. Alexander McQueen, a fashion statement until the end. Can a funeral be a runway? When revolutionary fashion designer Alexander McQueen died by suicide in 2010, his funeral became a showcase of the fashion world's elite in their most somber attire. The service at St. Paul's Church in Knightsbridge, London, was attended by supermodels Kate Moss, Naomi Campbell, and Stella Tennant, along with designers Stella McCartney and Sarah Jessica Parker. In a touching tribute to McQueen's Scottish heritage, a single bagpiper led the funeral procession, playing Braveheart as mourners entered the church. Many attendees incorporated McQueen's signature-style elements into their funeral attire, with some women wearing his trademark sculptural designs or his iconic skull motifs. The service included readings from Anna Wintour, editor-in-chief of American Vogue, and a eulogy from Sean Lean, a jewelry designer and close friend of McQueen. The church was adorned with white roses, McQueen's favorite flower, and the order of service featured the designer's full name, Lee Alexander McQueen, rather than his professional moniker. Following the church service, a private cremation was held with only family members present. Later, McQueen's ashes were scattered on the Isle of Skye in Scotland, a place he had often visited and which had inspired many of his collections. The fashion house that bears his name continues, with his former assistant Sarah Burton taking over as creative director until her departure in 2023. Number 2. Aretha Franklin, A Queen's Farewell. How long does it take to say goodbye to the Queen of Soul? When Aretha Franklin died in 2018, her homegoing celebration lasted more than 8 hours and involved multiple outfit changes, even in death. Franklin's body was dressed in different outfits for each of 3 public viewings: a red dress with matching shoes for the first day, symbolizing her membership in the Delta Sigma Theta sorority, a blue dress on the second day, and a rose gold gown for the third day. For her actual funeral service at Detroit's Greater Grace Temple, Franklin was dressed in a 4th outfit, a sparkling full-length gold dress with sequin heels. She was transported in a 1940 LaSalle hearse, the same vehicle that had carried her father's body in 1984 and civil rights icon Rosa Parks in 2005. The marathon funeral featured performances by Stevie Wonder, Ariana Grande, Jennifer Hudson, and Chaka Khan, along with speeches from Bill Clinton, Jesse Jackson, and Al Sharpton. The service was a star-studded affair that reflected Franklin's musical legacy and her importance to the civil rights movement and American culture. In a particularly moving tribute, more than 100 pink Cadillacs lined the streets outside the church, a nod to her hit song Freeway of Love. Franklin was entombed at Woodlawn Cemetery in Detroit in a 24-karat gold-plated bronze Promethean casket, the same type used for Michael Jackson and James Brown. Number 1. John McCain, a bipartisan final tribute. Can a funeral transcend political divisions? When Senator John McCain died in 2018, his memorial services became a rare moment of unity in an increasingly divided America. McCain, who spent 5.5 years as a prisoner of war in Vietnam before his distinguished political career, planned his own funeral in his final months, using it to deliver a final message about American democracy. McCain's body lay in state in both the Arizona Capitol and the U.S. Capitol Rotunda, an honor reserved for the nation's most distinguished citizens. His Arizona memorial service included a powerful eulogy from former Vice President Joe Biden, who, despite being from the opposite political party, had maintained a close friendship with McCain for decades. In Washington, D.C., the National Cathedral service featured eulogies from 2 former presidents who had defeated McCain in his presidential bids, George W. Bush and Barack Obama. Both spoke of his courage and commitment to American ideals above party politics. In what many viewed as a rebuke to the political climate of the time, McCain specifically did not invite then-President Donald Trump to any of his memorial services. The most poignant moment came during daughter Meghan McCain's emotional eulogy, where she said, "The America of John McCain has no need to be made great again because America was always great." McCain was buried at the U.S. Naval Academy Cemetery in Annapolis, Maryland, next to his lifelong friend Admiral Chuck Larson, following a private service attended by family and close friends. Why do we remain fascinated by these elaborate celebrity send-offs? Is it because they offer us a final glimpse into lives lived in the spotlight, or do they remind us that even the most extraordinary among us must eventually face the same fate? Perhaps in watching how the famous say goodbye, we learn something about how to face our own mortality with a touch of spectacle, sincerity, or even humor, leaving the world with the same distinctive style with which we lived in it.